Ilia Topuria hits harder than nearly any other fighter in his weight class. People talk about this like it's a gift, like God has just blessed him with powerful hands and you either have it or you don't. And I think nothing could be further from the truth. Punching like Ilia is a skill, a learnable movement skill. There are a host of factors that can be seen, analyzed, understood, and copied, and anyone can learn to strike like Ilia, if you're prepared to put in some serious work. I want to demystify power in striking and give anyone watching the tools and understanding needed to learn to hit things hard. So you can go out into the world and win pointless street fights or speedrun CTE or whatever else it is fighters like to do. Okay, let's get into it. Starting with just a raw power punch. This is a movement where you're basically trying to make your fist hit something, usually another person, with just lots of force, which is what will result in knocking someone out. And this means that you need to generate force, like it has to come from somewhere.
Use your muscles, sure, but that doesn't really explain anything. I really don't think Ilia's muscle fibers are any different from his fellow fighters. Like, there is individual difference in muscle fiber type, but I don't think that's the X factor. The UFC and even your local gym is just brimming with twitchy type 2 muscle fiber boys. However, this is just no guarantee of actually punching powerfully. So if the muscles themselves aren't making more force generation happen, what is? Ilia punches things hard because he does the movement right. The literal action of punching is performed fairly close to optimally. And he as an individual is facilitating that in nearly every way possible with his body. In this video, I'll break both of those things down. One, what an ideal punch actually is, and then two, how, like Ilia, you actually facilitate that happening with your body. I'm going to look mostly at two punches, Ilia's right overhand and his left hook. And I'm going to focus on the things that add power to these punches, not every technical detail. And the principles for generating power in these two different strikes are actually very similar. So a punch starts with your legs applying force into the ground. The ground is your reference point, the thing that you punch from. Without this, a punch just doesn't work. Try punching while floating underwater or hanging in a harness to feel how true that is. So in a right overhand, the movement starts with the calf, quad, and glute extending the ankle, knee, and hip joints of the right leg. And then a left hook, it's the same but on the left leg. These three muscles work to straighten the leg, or at least apply force in that direction. So the ankle or the knee joint isn't necessarily opening fully, but the force is still being applied across that joint into the ground. Their goal is to create power. It's almost similar to jumping. They're working to push you forward. This is more true in a right overhand, or to rotate you. This is more true of a left hook. Out of all these muscles, the glute is the most important one, as it's the one that pushes on and opens the hip, which results in the rotation of the torso. This torso rotation is the middle part of this chain. It's taking the force from the legs up through the torso. And as the torso turns or moves forward, the shoulder and arm can then play their role in the strike. They need to take this rotational or forwards force and then hit it into the person. And you could, in theory, just like leave your arm completely straight. That's still a strike, but there are much more effective things you can do. You can essentially turn your arm into a whip using the stretch response from your muscles on your chest to make your arm hit things real fast. So ideally, when you rotate your torso or move it forward, your arm actually at the beginning of this movement travels backwards, going towards the rotation and stretching a bunch of important muscles on your torso, in particular your pecs. And most people kind of know how to do this already. It's what you do when you throw a ball, and it's just a movement skill. So these muscles then meet the rotation of the torso and bounce back, traveling more quickly. Then at the moment of impact, you stabilize that structure, locking everything in place so that nothing on your side bends, breaks, or move, and all that juicy force travels into the thing or person you're hitting. Now, this stretch principle is more true of looping punches. The same things do still apply in straighter punches, it's just less pronounced. Wonderful, you've just punched something, but mine wasn't that powerful, or I already knew that, you say. And that's where part 2 comes in. How do you actually facilitate this happening? How does Ilia make this work so much better than other people? And kind of more importantly, how do you, the average Joe, impede this? How do you stop this happening? Now, there are actually a lot of answers to this question, and I'm not going to get to everything in this video, but I'm going to focus on some of the most important parts of this. I'm going to break this down into 4 sections: the functioning of the leg muscles, weight position, mobility through the hips, and lastly, torso shape and torso muscle usage. I'll look at how Ilia advantages all of these parts and how you almost certainly do not. Okay, firstly, leg muscles. Again, leg muscles are the biggest generator of power in this movement. in particular your glutes. And it's no coincidence that the best power punchers are all dummy thick, and that great coaches are literally on record as saying the first thing they look for in an up-and-coming fighter is a fat booty. Again, the glutes in particular are important because they're the muscle that opens the hip and ultimately drives you forward and rotates the torso. If they're not doing that job, power just doesn't go from the leg into the torso. They're also, unsurprisingly, the least well-used leg muscle. People typically know how to use their calves and quads okay, but the glutes much less so. You almost definitely are not thick, let alone dummy thick. Ilia, however, is packing a DT, a dump truck. This is the powerful hip drive you need to punch good. Ilia is facilitating this. You aren't. However, that just raises more questions. If glutes are so damn useful and important, why don't more people use them well? And this is because of two obstacles. People's weight just being in the wrong place to actually even allow these muscles to work, and tightness around their hips restricting their range of motion and even ability to activate those muscles at all. Let's look at weight first. You need your center of gravity to be predominantly resting on the balls of your feet. And it's not that there should be no weight on your heels, but as a distribution, it needs to be at least 50% forward on the foot. And you can feel why this makes sense really easily. If you just try jumping with all your weight on your heels, and you'll immediately realize you're cooked. You just can't generate power from this weight position. Our posterior kinetic chain works down to the ball of our foot, not down to our heel. Like, this is part of the reason why it's so hard to fight when moving backwards, because your weight accidentally ends up on your heels. The other thing you need with weight is the correct distribution between your right and your left foot. Like, try throwing a left hook with all your weight on your right foot, or a right overhand with all your weight on your left foot. You'll very quickly realize this doesn't work either. You need your weight on the appropriate foot for the strike you're trying to do. Like, your left leg muscles working and pushing is just much more important in a left hook than your right leg muscles. And this is typically the reason why people's southpaw or opposite side striking sucks so much, is they just have the weight in the wrong place for the strike they're trying to throw. So basically, if your weight is just too far back or on the wrong leg, you just can't use your glutes appropriately to push and drive the strike. Ilia's weight is always forward, always stable, and always correctly distributed between his left and right foot for the strike he's trying to throw. He's facilitating the function of his leg muscles through his weight position. Your weight, on the other hand, is always too far back, on the wrong foot, or even not on the ball of the foot at all, on the side or inside of the foot, impeding your ability to use the right muscles to generate power. And two, the other big thing that is stopping you pushing with your glutes is the physical range of motion restriction on your hips, your hip flexors. If your glutes open your hips, drive the pelvis around, rotating the torso, your hip flexors close it, preventing this movement from occurring. You need to have adequate ability to actually physically open the damn hips in the first place. This is not easy and not common. So few people do this well. Ilia's hips are mobile as he completely effectively opens his hips in his striking, giving maximum possible drive to his torso and allowing his glutes to work through their full and effective range of motion. His range of motion at his hips is facilitating this movement happening properly. Look at how open his hip joints are at the end of these strikes. He literally cannot open them more. He's maxing it out. I would bet huge fucking stacks your hips do not look like this at the end of your strikes. Your hips will not open. Your hip flexors are too tight. You'll start your strikes in hip flexion and you'll finish your strikes in hip flexion. And you thus can't use your glutes to generate power effectively in the strike. And even if Ilia's hips don't fully open in the strikes, which isn't always practical, he's driving the force in that direction in the strike. And you aren't doing this. The last factor is torso shape and torso muscle usage. Once you effectively push up from the ground through your hips, your torso then needs to continue effectively transferring power through this system. If it just randomly deforms in response to the forces coming up through the hip, this isn't going to allow the power to go through the chain. It needs to be in the right shape, strong, stable, using the right muscles to be able to hold and even accelerate these forces. This is about functional and balanced usage of the torso muscles, in particular the lats, pecs, and abdominals. And the best way to do this is to positionally advantage their function through the shape and position of the torso, being round and symmetrical. If your torso is flat and collapsed, your pec and lat muscles cannot do their jobs properly. Your pec needs to stretch and shorten to add that whipping power into your strikes. If your chest is passively collapsed, the pec is just so disadvantaged. It can't do this job properly. Look at the difference in this torso roundness, and just look at how much easier it is for the pec to work from this round position. When it's collapsed and flat, it's just hard for it to do its job. The same is true for your lats. The more collapsed your chest, the further forward your shoulders sit on your body, and the more it's disadvantaging lat function. The fibers of these muscles are ending up too short to effectively do their job. The same is true for your abdominals. This torso position is just squishing them down. This is making it harder for them to work. On top of this, if your torso is asymmetrical, then you're really cooked. This is particularly noticeable in things like shoulder height or spine shape. You can't do much worse than having one shoulder passively internally rotated and high. This is again disadvantaging pec and lat function, but also disadvantaging your ability to stabilize effectively. Lat function is essential for stabilization and accelerating the rotational and forward forces in a strike. No surprises here again. Ilia is by default facilitating all of this happening. His torso is by default stable, symmetrical, and round. He is effectively transferring power up from his hips through his torso, even adding to these forces. His left lat in particular works really well. You can see in his right overhand, he adds to the force of this movement through his left lat contraction. He also uses his abdominals and obliques to effectively accelerate his left hook, and as he punches, his torso holds its round shape, allowing for the efficient and powerful contraction of his pec muscle, whipping his arm into people. Through his position, he is advantaging the function of all of his torso muscles. No muscle is left behind. Your torso, on the other hand, is likely not as round and not as stable. The forces do not transfer through as well and aren't accelerated. You're more collapsed through the chest, more asymmetrical. One shoulder is probably sitting high, your spine probably isn't sitting centrally. A bunch of your torso muscles are positionally disadvantaged and just not doing their job properly in this movement. Your pec is not stretching and contracting as effectively, and at worst, some people punch like they're just moving their arm forward through space. Your arm, like the actual arm, is weak as shit. This is like the least effective thing to punch with. You punch with your body, not your arm. There's a lot more I could say on this, to be honest, a lot more, but let's try to make this video length even remotely manageable and move on. How do you learn to be like Ilia, to facilitate your punches happening in the same way that he does? To get a big booty, weight in the right place, mobile hips, and a stable, symmetrical, well-supported torso with functional muscles? I'm going to answer this with one sentence. You fundamentally need to change every single thing you do all the time. Ilia is not just doing this in striking. He lives like this. This is his normal. He's doing this all the time. He uses his glutes just normally in everything he does. His hips are mobile just in his daily life. The same with everything else discussed. He's round through his torso, symmetrical and stable, just normally. That's just how he is. He learned how to do all of that as a kid probably, and has been doing it since. His movement is impregnated with it because it's his goddamn default.
I always had that power. I remember myself without much technique, but I was connecting the punches and putting guys to sleep.
Trying to learn to strike like Ilia and just striking is a fool's errand. Now, if you were raised from birth striking, potentially you could learn to do it then, but you weren't. You kind of suck. You need to do mindlessly large numbers of repetitions, not of the strikes, but of the things that facilitate the strikes happening. You need to learn to do these things every waking second you can to get even remotely close to doing this often enough. What does that mean practically? Like, what would that look like? Here's an example. Every single time your leg goes behind you in your daily life, like at any point, a few things need to happen. You need to use your glutes to effectively drive power into that movement, stretch and open up your hip joint, have your weight forward on your foot, and have your torso stable, round, and symmetrical. And this couldn't be more true of an activity than walking. Walking is nearly the single best place to acquire all of the skills you need to strike powerfully. Because we walk all the time everywhere, and all of the things you actually need, all of the principles are encompassed within that movement. What you probably don't need is glute bridges and hip flexor stretches. Firstly, just try whatever 10-minute posture routine thing you've done before. Honestly, try as hard as you can, just so that you know it doesn't work. If you want 3 shit pointless exercises that do nothing, there are a whole host of channels recommending that to you already. Like, I've actually done this thing I'm talking about in the video. No amount of exercises is going to make any difference. It's just pissing in the ocean in terms of effective scale. If just the rest of your time in your life you're doing your normal weight back, hip flexor dominated collapsed torso thing, it's just not going to make a dent. You're immediately undoing any benefit that you're accruing, if you could even do the movement right in the first place. Fundamentally, what you need to improve is your posture, the way you support yourself against gravity just normally. Then take those improvements and that conceptual understanding and use it to facilitate the movement happening properly. In terms of how to achieve that, I'm going to give you 3 ways. 1, watch some of my other videos. I have a video called How to Transform Your Posture that's probably going to cover a lot of important information. 2, I wrote a book about this. It's 120 pages illustrated step-by-step guide to doing this whole process. It's available to buy for like $12 US, probably the amount you spent on lunch today. Link in the bio. 3, crash course right now. You're learning hip extension and drive for walking and striking. This is how you generate power with your legs to move your torso, either rotating it or moving it forward. First step, getting your weight off your heels. Your heels need to be lighter in general, like someone has glued some eggshells to them and you don't want to break them. Then just push into the balls of your feet. Straighten your legs using your calves, quads, and glutes. Make your leg extend behind you. Then use your abdominals to keep your pelvis position fixed. It should not twist, rotate, skew, anything. Just sit in there doing nothing. Also keeping your belt line flat, so not letting your pelvis tilt forward. Do not worry about Alex Pereira for now. Now, when you're taking a step with all of these things in place, you need to feel your hip flexors stretch. That's the front of your hip stretching as the leg's coming behind you. If you don't feel your hip flexor stretch when you're doing this, you're doing it wrong. You need to challenge the mobility in this area all the time. Then keep both lats on, keep your elbow pits forward and your torso stable. With your spine straight, then breathe your chest up, round and out without just leaning back at the low back as you do this. Keep your abs on. Then continue to walk like this. Stay in control, don't just fall. Use your legs to drive you forward. Learn what it's like to be there and to move like that. Master those principles in walking and then have a look at bringing them through into striking. For a strike, you could just copy paste everything I said. Keep weight off your heels, drive into the ball of your foot, push from that point. Use your leg muscles to drive your hips open to either rotate your torso or move it forward or both. Feel the front of your hips stretching as you open it. If you aren't, you're not using the full effective range of motion at your hips. Once you've got that happening, feel that rotational force or forwards force or both in your torso. Don't worry about your arms at all to begin with. Just feel how leg power creates this movement. Eventually you can add the arm whip into it as you keep your torso round and stable as you do this. And you can eventually add other things like lat pulls or obliques if you want to be more like Ilia, but don't worry about any of that stuff at the beginning. Just focus on the hips. And this is conceptually quite simple, but in reality not easy to do at all. And before you come at me with 10,000 exceptions or what ifs, this video is short. There's only so much you can say in a 15-minute YouTube video. I'm looking at you, Edwin Shabazian, if that's how you say it. Although I really doubt he'd be knocking people out if he was in Ilia's weight class. Being heavier and taller allows you to knock people out with just good leverage and heavy limbs. We can actually learn the most about effective striking by looking at the lightest knockout artists, because they have to do the most things well to be effective. Now, if you like this content because it has fighters in it, don't subscribe. For now, I'm kind of done talking about fighters. I'm going to talk about all kinds of other movement skills that are relevant to fighting and just anyone who wants to learn to move well and to understand movement's fundamental principles. But if you want to see me make this exact same video another 20 times, I'm kind of done. Although maybe a video on a good kicker at some point. Also, other final self shout out, check out my book. There's a free sample on my website if you want to read a whole bunch of it for free to see if it's actually good and you'd like it. Again, links in the bio. Peace out. Thanks for watching.